Imagine you are sitting at your desk. You receive an email from your manager regarding a highly sensitive, potentially risky project. The email is surprisingly brief. It says, "We need to hit these numbers by Friday. Do whatever it takes to get it across the line. Let's be creative." You read it twice. Whatever it takes. You take the initiative, bend a few minor protocols, and push the project through. You hit the numbers. But on Monday, compliance flags the protocol breach. You are called into an office. You look at your manager, expecting them to back you up. Instead, they look at you with polite disappointment and say, "I have no idea why you violated protocol. I explicitly told you to be creative, not reckless. That was your decision." In that moment, you realize the trap. The email was not an instruction, it was a carefully constructed escape hatch. You know exactly what they meant. They know exactly what they meant. But on paper, they are completely clean, and you are holding the bag. You have just collided with one of the most sophisticated manipulation tactics in human interaction, plausible deniability. Today, we are going to deconstruct the architecture of ambiguity. We will explore how manipulators use linguistic gray areas to shift risk. How toxic leaders build structural firewalls to protect themselves. How emotional abusers weaponize the "just joking" defense, and most importantly, how you can force these hidden agendas into the light. To understand how plausible deniability works in everyday life, we first have to understand its origins. The term was officially coined in the mid-20th century by the CIA during the Cold War. It described a strategy where senior officials intentionally set up intelligence operations in a way that, if exposed, the leadership could plausibly deny any knowledge or involvement. But you do not need to be a Cold War spy to use this tactic. You just need to understand linguistics. In the workplace and in relationships. Plausible deniability is built using the architecture of ambiguity. It relies on the deliberate use of semantic gray areas, words and phrases that have multiple acceptable interpretations. Let us look closely at how a manipulator constructs a sentence. They rarely use the active voice. They do not say, "I want you to fire this client." Instead, they use the passive voice and vague modifiers. They say, "This client relationship is becoming unsustainable. It would be highly beneficial if the situation resolved itself soon." Notice the mechanics here. The subject of the action is completely removed. There is no "I" and no "you." There is only a floating desire for a resolution. If you take action and fire the client, and the company loses a massive revenue stream, the manipulator can step back and say, "I never told you to fire them. I simply observed that the relationship was strained. You acted on your own." This is the core of linguistic deniability. The manipulator communicates their desire perfectly, but they leave a back door unlocked. They encode their instructions with softeners and hedges, words like might, perhaps, somehow, ideally, or just. The danger of this language is that it forces you to become the interpreter. When someone speaks in gray areas, your brain naturally tries to fill in the blanks based on context, tone of voice, and body language. You translate their vague words into concrete actions. But the moment you take that concrete action, The manipulator strips away the context, points only to the literal words they used, and leaves you to take the fall. Plausible deniability is not just about words, it is about physical and organizational architecture. In highly toxic corporate environments, groups, or even family dynamics, manipulators do not just use ambiguous language. They build structural firewalls. Think of a traditional hierarchy. In a healthy structure, authority and responsibility are directly linked. The person at the top makes the decision, and therefore, they carry the risk of that decision. A Machiavellian leader, however, separates authority from responsibility. This is the concept of dirty work delegation. Let us say a CEO wants to implement a ruthless restructuring plan that will lay off a third of the workforce and destroy morale. A vulnerable leader would announce this themselves and absorb the hatred. A strategic, toxic leader will hire an external consultant or promote an ambitious, slightly naive middle manager to a temporary, special project role. The CEO gives the middle manager a vague, plausible mandate: optimize our operational efficiency. Behind closed doors. Through nods, winks, and unspoken pressure, the CEO makes it clear that optimization means brutal cuts. The middle manager, eager to please and hungry for status, executes the layoffs. The office becomes a toxic, miserable place. The workforce directs all their anger and hatred at the middle manager. When the tension reaches a breaking point, the CEO finally steps in. They act shocked. They play the role of the benevolent savior. They publicly fire the middle manager for misaligning with company culture. Reverse a few of the minor cuts to look like a hero, but keep the massive financial savings from the overall restructuring. This is structural deniability. The middle manager was never being promoted. They were being positioned as the human shield. They were the firewall designed to absorb the reputational damage while the architect of the chaos remained completely insulated. The manipulator achieves their exact goal without ever getting their hands dirty. While structural deniability ruins careers, emotional deniability ruins minds. We see this most clearly in personal relationships, friendships, and dating, through a psychological phenomenon we can call Schrödinger's joke. In quantum physics, Schrödinger's cat is a thought experiment where a cat in a box is simultaneously alive and dead until you open the box and observe it. In toxic relationships, the manipulator's insult exists in a similar state. It is simultaneously a vicious attack and a harmless joke, and its final state depends entirely on how you react. Imagine you are at a dinner party with your partner and a group of friends. Your partner casually drops a humiliating story about a mistake you made, phrasing it with a smile and a laugh. The table chuckles. You feel a sharp sting of humiliation. If you stay quiet, the insult lands. They have successfully diminished your status in front of the group and asserted dominance. But if you react, if you show anger, defend yourself, or ask them to stop, the manipulator immediately deploys plausible deniability. They raise their hands, look around the table with wide, innocent eyes, and say, "Wow. Relax. I was just joking. You are being way too sensitive." Suddenly, the frame of the interaction has been completely flipped. The issue is no longer their aggressive, humiliating comment. The issue is now your emotional instability. they have successfully disguised a psychological attack as humor. This is a micro-violation of a boundary. The manipulator is testing the fences. By using the "just joking" defense, they maintain total plausible deniability. They are sending a hostile message but hiding behind a socially acceptable mask. If they are called out, they simply deny the malicious intent. Because intent is invisible and impossible to prove, you are left looking like the aggressor who is ruining a nice dinner party, while the actual aggressor plays the victim. Over time, this mechanism conditions you to swallow your anger. Suppress your boundaries and accept disrespect just to avoid being labeled as crazy or too sensitive. Why is plausible deniability so incredibly exhausting to deal with? Why does interacting with these people drain your energy faster than interacting with someone who is openly hostile? The answer lies in how the human brain processes uncertainty, specifically a concept known as cognitive load. When someone is overtly aggressive and says, "I don't like you," or "I want you to take the blame for this," your brain knows exactly what to do. The threat is clear. You can fight back, you can argue, you can leave. The cognitive equation is simple. But when someone uses plausible deniability, they introduce severe ambiguity into your environment. Your brain is a prediction machine. It evolved to seek clarity and resolve ambiguity to keep you safe. When a manipulator communicates in gray areas, your brain goes into overdrive. You begin running endless internal simulations. Did they mean it that way? Am I overthinking this? If I confront them, will they just deny it? How can I prove what they meant? This constant background processing drains your executive function. It creates severe cognitive fatigue. The manipulator is casually throwing out ambiguous statements, expending almost zero energy, while your brain is working at maximum capacity trying to decode the invisible threats. Worse than the fatigue is the psychological side effect, phantom guilt. Because the manipulator always leaves a plausible alternative explanation, you begin to doubt your own perception of reality. When they tell you that you are reading too much into things, a part of you wonders if they are right. You start scanning your own behavior for flaws. You take on the responsibility for the friction in the relationship. This is the ultimate victory of plausible deniability. It does not just protect the manipulator from external consequences. It internalizes the conflict so deeply that the victim begins to gaslight themselves, doing the manipulator's work for them. Now that we have dismantled the mechanics of this tactic, we must discuss psychological self-defense. How do you survive an environment where ambiguity is weaponized? How do you deal with a person who refuses to take responsibility for their own shadows? The answer is simple in concept, but requires iron discipline to execute. You must destroy the gray area. You must force them into the light. Manipulators who rely on plausible deniability thrive in the shadows of unsaid words, implied meanings, and off-the-record conversations. Your primary defensive tool is called the paper trail, or forcing the signature. If you are in a professional environment and a manager gives you a vague, whiskey directive, do whatever it takes to hit the numbers, you must never act on the implication. Instead, you weaponize clarity. You follow up the verbal conversation with a written summary. You write, Just to confirm our conversation, you are instructing me to bypass the standard compliant review to meet Friday's deadline. Please confirm this is the correct procedure. You have just dragged their hidden intent out of the shadows and placed it under a spotlight. You are forcing them to sign their name to their own dirty work. 99% of the time, the manipulator will immediately backtrack. They will reply, "No, please follow all compliance rules." They will sacrifice the goal rather than accept the risk. You have successfully protected your boundaries. In personal relationships, dealing with the "just joking" defense requires a different tactic known as strategic incompetence. When the manipulator drops a passive-aggressive joke and waits for the room to laugh, do not get angry. Do not defend yourself. Instead, play completely, blankly dumb. Look them dead in the eye with a calm, curious expression, and say, "I don't get it. Can you explain the joke to me?" This is a devastating countermove. Plausible deniability relies on speed and social grace. By asking them to explain the joke, you grind the interaction to a halt. You force them to logically dissect a comment that was designed to be emotional poison. If they try to brush it off by saying, "Never mind, it was just a joke," you remain relentlessly calm and say, "No, I really want to understand. What is the punchline?" By refusing to react emotionally, and instead demanding absolute, literal clarity, you strip away their plausible deniability. You make the ambiguity incredibly uncomfortable for them, rather than for you. Ambiguity is the soil in which manipulation grows. The manipulator wants to remain a ghost, influencing outcomes without ever leaving a fingerprint. Your defense is not to fight the ghost. Your defense is to turn on the lights. Refuse to translate their vague hints. Refuse to do their dirty work. Demand clarity, document everything, and watch how quickly the powerful manipulator retreats when forced to stand visibly behind their own words.